Your breath is the key. There is something breathing in you right now. And maybe it was never really you. This isn't a metaphor, it's science. The HeartMath Institute measured it. Your breathing creates a real electromagnetic field that changes the environment, influences the people around you, and shapes your own reality. But here's the shocker. If you're not breathing consciously, that field isn't being guided by you. It's being driven by old memories, inherited fears, and invisible patterns you don't even realize you carry. Thoth warned us millennia ago. Man is fire and breath. But if the breath is not yours, the creation won't be either. And that's exactly what's happening. You believe you're creating your own life, but you're just reacting, breathing the way you were taught, in a rush, with tension, with fear. But when you take back control of your breath, something shifts. The field around you starts to reorganize. Reality responds differently. And today you're going to find out exactly how to do that, because this field can be reprogrammed right now. And the key is the silent observer living inside you. Stay until the end, because you're going to learn to breathe in a way that activates your real power. And this isn't just a breathing exercise. It's a sacred technology that Thoth left hidden. And it starts to be revealed with your next breath. The soul enters the body with the first breath. And in that breath, destiny is written. And when the veil starts to lift, something unexpected happens. You begin to realize it's no longer just about breathing. It's about identifying the origin of what drives that breath. Because if what's breathing inside you is fear, scarcity, guilt, or urgency, then that's what's shaping the invisible structure of your reality day after day. And that's where the trap lies. You can take courses, watch lectures, repeat positive affirmations like mantras, sit upright during meditation, eat clean, and even seek elevated thoughts. But if the invisible engine sustaining your vibration is still fear, no effort will have a real effect. You're trying to build a new world on ground that's still contaminated. The ancient civilizations knew this. In Egypt, the priests of Thoth understood breath as a vibrational code. They treated breathing not as biology, but as pure alchemy. In India, they called it Prana. In the Hebrew tradition, Ruach. In the Mayan culture, Ik. All these terms had one thing in common. They weren't talking about air, but about essence, life force, origin, the original breath. But the Egyptians went a step further. They didn't just name this force, they mapped its geometry. They created a precise system to use breathing as a key to access different states of consciousness and creative frequencies. And this system wasn't handed out randomly. It was reserved for the initiates, those who had silenced the external noise enough to hear what moved within. This map, known in Hermetic traditions as the geometry of creation, isn't drawn on papyri or hidden in temple walls. It's etched in your body, in your energy centers, in the way air moves inside you. And with each conscious breath, you activate one of those internal keys even without knowing it. Thoth said, "What vibrates within you shapes what manifests outside of you." This is not symbolic, it's literal. The world around you is constantly reacting to what vibrates silently in your field. And what vibrates silently is determined by what's breathing in you. Breathing with fear is vibrating chaos. Breathing in a rush is vibrating distraction. Breathing with resistance is vibrating blockage. But when the breath becomes conscious, when you internally take over the movement that has always been automatic, the field begins to respond differently. It's as if reality, until then confused and fragmented, starts to find a new direction. Because the origin has changed. And if the origin changes, everything changes. That's the secret the modern mind doesn't see because it's too busy trying to fix the effects without ever touching the cause. Rational thinking seeks logic, plans, control. But the creative field doesn't respond to logic. It responds to coherence. It responds to the silent vibration that emanates from the breath. This hidden map isn't esoteric in a vague sense. It's real, it's practical, and it's active right now as you breathe. The only question is, how often are you accessing this map with presence, with intention, with truth? This map isn't lost. It's encoded in you. And your next breath may be the first key, the birth of the observer, the one who sees without touching. But what happens when you finally turn that key within? Something changes, silently, without explosion, without noise. Like discovering that all along someone has been watching your life from inside you. Someone who doesn't think, doesn't react, doesn't judge, just observes. And that someone isn't an idea. It's you, the real you. For years you believed you were what you thought, that your identity was made up of ideas, opinions, memories, desires, judgments. But all of that is temporary form. The mind builds, organizes, reacts. But it isn't you. What you are doesn't think, it simply sees. And that seeing is the birth of what the ancients called the still eye. In writings attributed to Thoth, this point of consciousness is described as the one that remains even when everything around it changes. It doesn't shift with time. It doesn't swing with emotions. It doesn't cling to form. It's what watches form arise and disappear. It's what sees without touching, feels without being affected, perceives without interfering. Hermetic texts call this higher consciousness, the part of the human being that exists beyond duality, beyond yes and no, right and wrong, gain and loss. When you breathe without interfering, without trying to control, without forcing a sensation, it is in that space that this consciousness appears. And when it appears, it doesn't shout, it simply reveals itself. In that instant, something new is born. The observer. The observer doesn't try to change thoughts. It sees them, doesn't fight emotions, it recognizes them, doesn't try to force a frequency, it simply breathes and perceives. And this perception, clean, silent, neutral, starts to transform everything. Because by seeing without getting involved, you stop feeding the repetitive cycles of the mind. Drama loses strength, anxiety loses ground, resistance dissolves. Thoth described this process as the beginning of true transmutation. In alchemical terms, it's the first stage of solve et coagula, the dissolution of the rigid ego and the formation of a new identity based not on effort but on presence. From that point on, everything that happens inside you stops being personal. The thought that once defined who you were now becomes just a movement, like a leaf carried by the wind. And you are not the leaf. You are the sky where it moves. It's a subtle but deep change. And when it happens, the reality outside also begins to respond. Situations, encounters, people's reactions, everything changes. Because the one seeing now is someone else, and what sees without clinging creates a new vibration, a vibration that organizes. This is the true birth, not the physical one, but the birth of awakened consciousness. That moment when you realize you were always there, but had no name, no form, you were just waiting for the space to be created. Most people are still trying to control their thoughts, forcing positivity, believing that overcoming inner chaos is a matter of mental strength. But the secret is not in effort. It's in that which observes everything without getting lost in anything. The question is no longer what you think, but who is noticing the thought. And that one is already starting to wake up. What happens now isn't something you see with your eyes or hear with your ears. It's something you sense subtly in the field. The field around you begins to respond even without words, even without action. And this isn't mysticism, it's physics. Science calls it the observer effect. The simple conscious presence of the one observing changes the behavior of what's being observed. This phenomenon has been repeatedly documented in quantum physics experiments. A beam of particles behaves differently depending on whether a conscious observer is present. If the observer is there, the pattern changes. If not, reality behaves randomly. But if the field responds to consciousness, then it's that consciousness that is shaping reality. Thoth spoke of this thousands of years before modern physics named the phenomenon. He called it the silent word. It wasn't speech with sound. It was vibrational speech, an invisible emission of pure intention, free from noise, manifesting not through effort but through coherence. The silent word doesn't command, it organizes, it doesn't force, it aligns, it doesn't ask, it creates. This word is activated the moment breath becomes presence. Not in thought, not in action. It's at that exact point between inhale and exhale, a split-second interval that you live through every day but never learn to inhabit. That space is where reality is decided, without effort, without planning, without control. In alchemy, this moment is called the invisible fire. It's the exact instant when the substance begins to transform from within. Even if nothing has changed on the outside, it's the beginning of the crystallization of the new, and it doesn't require you to do more. It only requires you to be, to witness, to breathe, and to be there fully. It's in this space between sound and form that the field begins to obey. You don't see lights, you don't feel tremors, but something starts to shift. The frequency, the vibration around you starts to reflect this deep state of presence. The reality that once reacted to your desperation now responds to your consciousness, and you did nothing but breathe with truth. In Hermetic teachings, this is called mental magic, but not magic as illusion or trickery. Magic as the vibrational science of intentional creation. The mind, when aligned with the breath and detached from ego, becomes the most powerful tool for manifestation. But it's not about imagining what you want. It's about being what you desire, vibrating that, breathing that silently. Thoth said, "In silence, the word becomes flesh." It's in that silence that the field receives the purest instructions. Instructions that don't come from speech or from the rational mind. They come from the awakened observer. And that observer doesn't need to explain anything, it just needs to breathe and perceive. Now imagine how many times have you been in that interval without knowing it? How many times did your field respond to that silent point but you were too distracted to notice? How many realities have already been created around you just because for a brief moment you were present? You've been present in thousands of moments of silent creation. But you never realized you were at the center of them. The quantum principle that explains Thoth's mystery. Because no one ever showed you how to look at that specific point, that micro-instant that goes unnoticed even by the most trained minds. Breathing happens. You inhale, you exhale. But in the middle of that flow, almost invisible, there's a gap. A pause so brief it seems not to exist. But it's there. Exactly there where time stops. This space between the two breaths is what the ancient Egyptians called the rest of Ra. It's not just a spiritual metaphor. It was an energetic instruction for the initiates of Thoth's mysteries. That interval was not empty. It was a vibrational sanctuary. The only place where nothing moves but everything is decided and no time within time. And there, in the exact moment when the air is about to leave or enter, you stop being a stream of thoughts and become a point of still, pure consciousness, present, silent, and deeply creative. Today, quantum physics calls that space the quantum pause, a 0.3-second pause. Just enough to completely change what your nervous system communicates to your field. Enough to transform an automatic reaction into a choice. Enough to rewrite not only your perception but the vibration you emit to the universe. In practice, it seems so small that many ignore it. And that's exactly why it's powerful, because it's subtle, because it demands that you be fully present in that instant, even if it lasts less than the blink of an eye. time slows down, the body quiets. And if you're present right there in that point between action and non-action, you enter what the alchemists called the inner nigredo. Nigredo wasn't just a moment of darkness, it was the preparation. It was the chamber where spiritual gold began to form. It was the silence before the word, the dark before the light, the no before the yes. A state of total suspension where raw matter begins to dissolve its impurities to reveal what was always there, the essence. Thoth describes this as the moment when the fire is lit in the darkness. The fire in this case is not literal. It's the spark of pure intention that can only be activated when the ego goes silent. And the ego only goes silent in the space that cannot be filled by effort, only by presence. It's in this place that seems to hold nothing where you find everything but attention. This space is not comfortable for the mind. Most people spend their lives running from this interval. When it approaches, they automatically fill it with thoughts, with hurry, with distraction. Because emptiness is frightening. Silence confronts. But it's precisely there that all creation begins. It's in that moment that true training begins. Because being present in the silence between two breaths is not something you force, it's something you allow. And that allowance is the beginning of a new way of being. A way where you no longer react, you respond. You no longer seek, you listen. You no longer try to fill, you learn to dwell. Most people run from the void, not knowing it's exactly where all creation begins. And when you learn to stay in that void without running, something even deeper happens. You begin to descend inward, downward into the temple that has always been there, but that you never learned to inhabit, your own body. Thoth didn't see the human body as a set of bones and muscles. To him, the body was a living pyramid, a temple built with cosmic precision. And every part of that temple holds a story, every tension a secret, every pain a doorway. The body doesn't lie. It just repeats until you listen, until you enter, until you breathe into it. Hermetic tradition states the body is the mirror of the soul. That means everything you've lived, everything you've resisted, everything you avoided feeling is stored somewhere inside. Not as a metaphor, but as a real frequency memorized in the flesh, in the organs, in the joints, in the rhythm of your breath. What wasn't expressed became a block. What wasn't cried out became a knot. What wasn't accepted became tension. But here's the secret the initiates knew. These memories are not here to punish you. They're here to be transformed. And the key to that isn't positive thinking. It's conscious breathing. Breathing exactly where it hurts. Breathing where you usually contract, where you hold back, where you hide from yourself. Because when you go down to that point and remain with presence, the energy starts to move. The ancient priests of Thoth taught that each breath taken with intention could access an inner chamber of wisdom. They aligned the breath with points on the body that corresponded to energy portals, similar to what the East later called chakras. But before that, in Egypt, those points were treated as chambers of the inner temple, and each one needed to be activated, purified, integrated. The first chamber is the heart. That's where the emotional truth you've learned to hide lives. When you breathe into that space, you might feel the weight of old wounds, of unspoken words, of unresolved love. But it's also the space where compassion lives, the kind that can dissolve it all. The next chamber, the center of the belly, holds your life force, your intuition, your power to manifest, often blocked by guilt, shame, or fear of your own light. The invisible field you emit without knowing. Because when you breathe with presence inside your own temple, something begins to happen outside of it. Without you saying a word, without making a single move, the field around you responds. And this isn't just a subjective effect, it's measurable. Science is already able to detect it. The HeartMath Institute proved that your heart, yes, your heart, emits an electromagnetic field that can expand up to 8 feet from your body. And what powers this field? Your breath. It's what regulates the coherence between heart and brain. It's what harmonizes or disorganizes the vibration you transmit to the world. What's most impressive is that this field affects everything around you. People, environments, even plants and animals. Everyone feels your presence before they even hear your voice. Because your field arrives first and it's transmitting every second who you really are on the inside. That's why some people walk into a room and everything seems to calm down. Others enter and the energy gets heavy, tense, unstable. It's not charisma, it's the field, it's frequency. And that frequency is being shaped not by your words, but by the quality of your breath, by your internal coherence. In alchemy, this phenomenon was called the magnetic aura of the breath. A subtle but powerful emission that not only reflected the internal state of the alchemist, but also affected the matter around them. Thoth taught that the frequency of the breath aligns the worlds because breath carries the will of the soul. It's the bridge between the invisible and the tangible. When you breathe out of alignment, your field vibrates disorder. And this shows up as delays, conflict, noise, resistance. But when you breathe in coherence, with truth, with surrender, with rhythm, you no longer need to force change from the outside because the field starts to organize it for you. You become a beacon, invisible but active. A fixed point that reorganizes everything around not by force but through resonance. And this is the beginning of true manifestation. Not the kind that comes from mental effort or forced repetition of desires, but the one born from the state of being. When you are whole within, the world begins to reflect that back, and there's no need to rush, to convince, or to chase. You vibrate and the universe responds. It's simple. And at the same time, it's the highest spiritual technology that exists. Now that you've activated the field, you're ready to discover what happens when this magnetism meets true inner stillness. And it's precisely at this point that everything changes. Because most people believe they need to move, to push, to race against time to make things happen. But the creative field, the same field that responds to your breath, doesn't react to speed. It responds to frequency. And more than that, it responds to the stability of that frequency. Thoth said, "The highest force in the universe is the one that doesn't move but sustains, like the center of a hurricane. Around it, everything spins in fury. But at the core, in the eye, there is absolute silence." That's where true power lies, not in the chaos that stirs, but in the presence that holds. In the corpus hermeticum, this wisdom appears as the principle of perfect movement, that which remains still in essence even in the midst of transformation. It's the state of active receptivity, the point where the alchemist no longer forces transformation. He simply prepares the field, breathes with intention, and allows the invisible to begin its work. This stillness is not passivity, it is power. It's the firmness of a mountain that doesn't need to move to shift the winds. It's the steadiness of the sun that doesn't need to chase anything. It simply shines, and everything organizes around it. When you reach this state of living stillness, your breath enters such an aligned rhythm that your field stabilizes like a crystal. And crystals, as we know, have the power to amplify, organize, and sustain vibrations. Your entire body becomes an instrument of resonance. It's at this point that everything begins to come to you because you've stopped being a body chasing results and you've become a coherent center that radiates purpose, clarity, and confidence. And reality, which once seemed indifferent, now begins to revolve around your presence, not as magic, but as vibrational consequence. You've learned to breathe. You've learned to observe. You've learned to sustain. Now you're about to become the very channel of creation. You're not just breathing. You're sending invisible commands that shape your reality without you even knowing. And if you think that's a metaphor, The HeartMath Institute proved that your breath emits a real electromagnetic field powerful enough to affect people, places, and even events. Now take a deep breath, because what Thoth revealed thousands of years ago goes far beyond that. He said your breath is the secret language of creation, and those who don't master that language live inside realities they didn't create, controlled by frequencies they don't even recognize. Most people breathe but never knew who is breathing through them, and this is the hidden code no one ever told you. You can reshape your reality from within with the power of a single conscious breath, but only if you learn to observe what's commanding your field right now. And when that observer awakens, reality begins to obey.